So the hardest part about all of this is definitely figuring out where to begin. Um, and I've been having many conversations with lots of people for a long time, but I've had a couple recently that have re-inspired me to just kind of open this door and try and get the conversation flowing about why I guess I'm so passionate about the things I believe, and I think that it comes across well for people, and it can be well received. So I am going to do my best to just start talking and to continue talking, which is something I do plenty of, but I find it very hard to do in this setting. It's very formal and it's very official, and there's a lot of people who are much, much smarter than me, and I'm merely taking from them. And trying my best to deliver a message that I think is receivable. Um, and yeah. Oh, this is so difficult. All of this is so difficult. I find zero issue in having conversations about this all day long with anyone. I have so much to say, but I don't know where to begin. I guess we all begin with our story. Ooh, I get to begin with talking about my story and what brought me here. Okay, so we'll go that route. I initially got into all of this because of nutrition. And what got me into nutrition was seeing a video about a woman named Dr. Terry Walls. I've talked about this many times. And she reversed her secondary progressive multiple sclerosis from being in a tilt recline wheelchair where she could barely move. She was nearly, just not functional as a person as far as physical mobility. Her mind was still working enough to the point where she was able to continue to do a lot of research, and she looked at a lot of rat studies and different things like that, and the different nutrients they were using and to support brain development, or slow brain degeneration, I should say. They're trying to induce a brain degenerative disease into these rats, and then they're trying to introduce different supplements and different nutrients to try and slow, reverse, see what they can do with this. So she looked into all these different nutrients and started taking, all these supplements, very regimented amount of supplements, and she noticed that, she did actually feel like her degeneration slowed, but it certainly did not stop, and it definitely did not turn around. And then she thought, wait, if all of these things are working in unison together, and I think in unison is really going to be this whole thing that we're going to talk about here. If all of these things are working in unison together, then what about the fact that these foods are developed to deliver you an incredibly balanced, amount and quantity and types of nutrients alongside certain types of fiber or fat or protein or carbohydrates if you need them. And it is, the foods are meant to deliver these things in a proper way that work in unison, in a symbiotic relationship, so that they deliver you all of the nutrients that you need, or at least that plant can deliver, or animal product, or whatever it may be, in a combined manner that allows the body to take it in properly, assimilate it properly. It has all of the coenzymes and other factors that might be necessary for that. You're not just simply taking a supplement, which is just a single, or maybe it's a multivitamin and it has a complex, and that is meant to mimic the aspect of taking in this broad variety of foods. So when she thought about that, and then also the aspect she also thought about is there's only things we've only been able to study and examine so many things in plants and the things that we eat. We're discovering new things like borine, and all these other things that are essential parts of the animal foods that we have kind of cut out by not eating marrow, by not eating all of the joints, or like turning the joints and ligaments into bone broth at the very least. And eating those things, by eating this nose to tail animal-based diet where you are trying to eat every aspect of that, the organs. There's bone, you can grind up bones and eat that. There's I think that's where the borine comes from, and it's very good for us, and it's something that we've just discovered. I mean, we just discovered the microbiome 10 years ago. This is a fact, and I will get back to Terry Walls, and we'll get back there. This is a fact I love to throw at people. Most people don't know what the appendix does still, right? The appendix is useless. The appendix is not useless. The appendix contains a concentrated form of your microbiome. the thing that would have been, at first delivered to you via breast milk from your mother. It is very important to breastfeed. I know it's weird to hear about that from a single man with no children, but the reality is when you breastfeed a child, you are not just delivering them food, you are delivering them all of these aspects of your immune system and of your gut bacteria. Your whole microbiome is being delivered to them. So that is something that is being strongly affected. Now I did lose a bit of where my place was. I know that I wanted to get back to Dr. Terry Walls. So I will get back to that there. I would think I was going another direction. Sorry, folks. Sometimes that's the way it goes. So the reality is, I was getting to Terry Walls. Oh, I think the in unison. So the aspect of foods, right? There's so many compounds in foods. I think I was just really getting to that. Oh, the appendix. The appendix. Yes, the appendix contains a concentrated form of your microbiome. And so when you take, especially now, if you take something like a antibiotic or something like that, it is meant that if something got in your system and wiped you out, that you would be able to recover. Your appendix can squirt out a form of or a concentrated form of your microbiome, and it can repopulate the healthy cells in your body. So it's useless because we didn't know what the microbiome was until 10 years ago. Maybe I've been saying that for a couple of years, so maybe it's closer to 15, maybe 20 even now. I definitely, it's very short. It's short, absolutely short in comparison to what the type of research that we've been doing in the nutritional field. So again, Dr. Terry Walls taking into consideration all of these aspects of food that we haven't even yet to understand, and the combinations in which they work that we haven't even yet to begun to understand. So she reverted to taking, instead of taking all these supplements, which I know she still took a good amount, she also used like electrostimulus therapy in her mind, to use like a small amount of electroshocks to re-stimulate the neurocenters, whatever. I don't know, the neurons, the neuroreceptors. You're trying to recreate neuroreceptivity and pathways in the brain via electrostimuli. So she did use all these things, mindfulness, outdoors, because it's important to get sunlight every day. Vitamin D is huge. So she started now saying, okay, if I'm supposed to get all of these things from, if I'm supposed to get all these nutrients, I should take this in from food. Changed her whole diet to a pretty refined version of, a paleo version of diet, which is whole foods based, obviously. It's a lot of like fish, omega-3 rich fatty acids, which has grass-fed beef, grass-fed butter. It's fish, lots of fish, shellfish, seafood. Berries are very high in nutrients, high in fiber, and low in sugar. They're also much more plentifully available. The reason I think berries would be a much better part of the human diet is because berries are much more prevalent all around the globe. Fruit are not. Fruit are incredibly seasonal. Berries are obviously seasonal, but they grow for a longer duration. You can get they usually grow in like droves. So especially here in the Pacific Northwest, like we are outrun by blackberries. I mean, it's a whole thing. It's because they're not necessarily native. But they're everywhere, and they grow for a long period of time. So you can eat a lot of berries in a season. You're not going to get a lot of fruit, itching my foot, because unless you live in a nearly tropical climate, and you're going to get it for a short period of time, and you're also fighting so many other animals for that. And so you really, yeah, whatever. That's the case against fruit. Also, none of those fruits existed 100 years ago. So, but berries kind of are the sweet spot, pun intended, of the fruit world, but they're not a fruit necessarily, and they're a berry. So yes, so berries high in fiber, high in nutrients, low in sugar, and then obviously the high quality animal foods, and then lots of different versions of all the different forms of your cruciferous vegetables, your brassicas, all these different forms of these really nutrient dense leafy greens. Some people are making a case against leafy greens at this moment, saying that they're high in oxalates, things like that. I honestly think unless you're experiencing a very specific autoimmune disease, and where I think the absolute best thing for you to try is carnivore diet. I know that sounds ridiculous to people, but I mean, it's absolutely, meat is really the easiest thing for your body to take in and process. And people say like, oh, it makes me feel weird, blah, blah, blah. I think there's psychological associations in a lot of that. Sometimes it can. Sometimes some people don't do as well with meat, but The reality is we are meat eaters. We are primarily meat eaters, and that it is at least 40 to 50% of our diet within the ancestral way that we have grown to cultivate. I mean, it's minimal of about 40% of our diet. There's plenty of evidence to support that in advanced hunter-gatherer and modern times, our main, what we want, peasants ate grains and all this cheap food. This is a process of agriculture where we can feed people a lot of calories cheaply, but it is not healthy. You can see a decline in human health since the agricultural revolution. So we look at things, since the past 200 years ago, like you see like a huge increase in white flour and sugar and all these things, and then you see refined foods, just kind of slowly escalating through that phase. And then over the past 50, 60 years, we see like the processed food phenomenon and the industrial seed oils, and then all of the regulations and the different advice given by different regulatory bodies about the diet. And then we just see this huge, just the human health situation just shits the bed over the past 50, 60 years. And people have been steadily eating less butter, less red meat. They've been eating more carbohydrates. They've been eating plenty of meat and fat alternatives or polyunsaturated fats in the place of saturated fat. So the studies do actually show that people have been doing their best to follow those guidelines, and that it is not at all increasing our health. And okay. So we're still getting back to the story, Terry Walls. I find it very unfortunate that we're encouraging people to eat less meat, because then they think a healthy dinner is a pasta, is it pasta, or is it in just like rice and beans and things. They're leaning toward, when they do eat healthy, they're not eating actual healthy food, and then when they fall back, they're also eating garbage. So this idea that we're not, so instead of encouraging people that a really healthy meal is a steak cooked in butter or like animal fat, or even ghee, or duck fat, duck fat's really fatty, but like tallow, beef tallow, something like that, pork fat. Cook a steak in that, have a side with like spinach and mushrooms cooked in butter, or like zucchini noodles cooked in butter with all of that. Like, I mean, that's an incredibly healthy meal, and that is just so satisfying and so good. No one's leaving that dinner like, oh crap, I'm really suffering here. Now, again, meat is expensive, and that can be hard, so you might be stuck with like ground beefs and things like that. So I get it, and then it's not as rewarding, it's not as satisfying to create those meals. Okay. Back to the story. Terry Walls. I got into nutrition. I see this woman. She's a teaching physician. She's a teaching physician. She teaches doctors, and she also is like, she practices and studies medicine. So she is someone who is really interested in the idea that science can understand how to reverse and cure disease. And the conclusion that she has come to is what most are coming to, what people you really have to come to the conclusion of, is that we are feeding ourselves disease slowly. We are not just simply randomly acquiring certain diseases. That can happen, yada, yada, yada. We can't talk about that or worry about that. That's the same thing as being struck by a car. You can't live your life, it's like, oh, you can live your life as if you're going to be hit by a car every day, but live your life to the fullest. Yes and no. That could also be like, live your life to the fullest. So eat milkshakes all day long. If you're going to die tomorrow, then eat milkshakes all day long. Obviously, my weakness is milkshakes. But that's not the case. So we have to have some type of longevity in mind. And my goal is a longevity that leads me to, I have so many avenues to talk about this. This is all so connected. My goal is to have very few years of my life be considered old age. And I watched this happen with my cat. I would consider a few months of her 18 years to be old age. And I would consider the last 6 or 7 days she wasn't eating to be the only time she was not maybe in the best place. She was not suffering. She passed naturally. Sorry if this is all dark, whatever. And she went comfortably. The only time she showed struggle of like not being able to move around and that her like she was shutting down was 15 minutes before she passed away naturally. So I fed my cat bone broth and meat basically the majority of her life, because it was about the past 9 to 10 years, and she's 18, so it was probably close to 10 years she's been eating this way. And she lived a very healthy life. I hadn't taken her to the vet in a long, 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 long time. 18 years. I mean, I'm sorry. The proof is in the pudding. She was not suffering. I know that animal very well. So, yeah, if anyone, I guess, has anything to say about that, I don't care. So back to my story. My story, it's all about me. I mean, I'm the only one on this camera, so it is all about me. It's actually all about the message. And the message came through me, man. I mean, honestly, it did. I was talking with a friend the other day about how I just can't understand how this became who I am. I mean, if you just look back at my past and retrace the steps, it's just this is not a foreseeable outcome. So, nutrition. I get into that. I see this video. I'm in my car waiting to be delivered a message about which lights I need to pick up because it's for a hair salon I used to work at. I'm sitting in my car scrolling through Facebook, Instagram. I think it was barely a thing at this time. This is I was 21, I think, maybe, yeah, 21, maybe 22. I think I was 21. I'm 31 now, so it is 10 years ago. So yeah, I'm scrolling through Facebook, blah, 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 blah. I see this video, Dr. Terry Walls. It's like 17 minutes. It's a TEDx talk, and it's got like all these disclaimers all over it about how this is not like USDA does not support this, but oh my God, it's ridiculous. A doctor who cured herself and said she ate these foods and you can do it too. And you're like, this is not, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I love how dangerous they think it is. Instead of like, well, we can give you chemotherapy. We can shock your whole body with chemicals in hopes that, again, that you will be able to win. Hopefully you still have your appendix. That your cells will be able to repopulate after we've wiped out just the entirety of your system in hopes that you will be able to repopulate and now, it won't come back. So, yes, obviously these are treatments after the fact, and that is not what I am here for because I'm not a doctor, and nor do I pretend to be, and nor would I ever want to be one, because I don't think doctors have anything to do with keeping you healthy. They have everything to do with fighting the situation after it has occurred. That's what a doctor is there for. So, oh man, this is long. Is it recording? It is recording. Wow, thankfully. So yes, my story. Nutrition. I get into nutrition, and it's a long while, and I go through many different routes. For a while, I was vegan, I went vegetarian, I went vegan. I saw some things that intrigued me with like spectrographs about, cooking food and how we're destroying the energy within the food. And I started, getting interested in like raw vegan concepts, and I kind of went down that rabbit hole for a little bit there. So I have been vegetarian for a little bit. I was vegan for a smaller bit. And I was like nearly raw vegan for even a smaller bit. So yeah, I've tried those things. I've definitely experimented with my side with lots of different things. In the beginning, I was like, okay, well, I'm still eating whole foods. I'm eating like rice and quinoa, and I just had to change my diet overall, and I had no idea how to eat healthy. So I get into all this, and I'm starting to experiment with all these different avenues, and I see, maybe a year, and again, the original concept is with this paleo-ish kind of, we've evolved eating these foods. These are what foods really are. This is how they fuel the body. These are the reason these types of foods are better than others. Avoid your grains, your flours, and stuff like that, and your sugars, and you're doing just so much better than your average standard American. So I start following this, and again, I go from paleo kind of into this weirder rabbit hole because I have a weird brain, and I like to follow some interesting thoughts sometimes, and I followed a little bit of a goofy rabbit hole, I feel like, and then I came out of it. I got just back, and I just needed more. I just was dying, to be very honest. I just did not feel good, and my brother was cooking chicken, and I was making my quinoa and blah, blah, blah. We were going to do lettuce wraps, and I was just like, let me have a piece of that chicken. And from there, it was over. I just ate that chicken, and it was just like, yeah, like this is what I need to do. So yes, and then from there back into kind of the paleo-ish, and evolved from there. I've tried keto. Keto is actually something I'm very experienced with as far as my personal experience, and then helping people with it, and then also having conversations with it, trying to help wrap people's minds around it. And I think I'll do a whole whole video of its own on keto and what that is, and why that's important, and why it's not to be laughed at, and why it's not preposterous, and why it's actually the only scientific based diet, because it's talking about turning on a certain system in your body. So yeah, my story. Here we go. I get into new food and I start realizing that, oh, if I want really good food, then I have to be very concerned with the way that the food was grown and the way that the food was raised. Excuse me. And so I wanted to start growing my own food. I had a couple friends that were thankfully very great and helped me out, and they came over and planted a big garden in my backyard. So the house I moved into had a tree removed right before I moved into there. So there was just this big like hole in the ground, honestly. So I was like, hey, I'm going to fill that in with a bunch of dirt from the city. I'm going to throw in a bunch of my own scraps from the juicing I was doing at that time, because I was just like, bam, give me all that juice nutrients from these vegetables, because I thought that was fantastic at the beginning. And it probably was. I was eating raw kale salads with like kale, collard greens, broccoli, Swiss chard, bok choy, sprouts, walnuts, all different types of like kind of like seeds, hemp seeds, things like that. I was going bam off the wall with it. So that's what I was doing at the beginning, and it actually felt pretty good. Pardon me. I mean, no time has passed us all. At all. What are you talking about? Okay, so nutrition, growing food. At this time, I live in a house in Clawson, Michigan, and I'm not raising any animals for sure, but I can start to grow my own food. At that time, I was doing all right for myself. I was buying a lot of my meat from Whole Foods, was trying to get the best quality stuff that I could, and I was buying, obviously, a lot of my produce from there as well. Whole Foods wasn't that bad. The meat is definitely expensive. The produce is pretty good quality, and it's not that expensive either. It's the rest of the entire store that is, first of all, garbage and useless for a lot of it, other than like your cooking and baking kind of needs. But I mean, anything that comes in a box, it doesn't matter if it came from Whole Foods. It's really, it's not good. It's not good, and the agricultural practices behind it are not good. All the packaging, all the resources that go into it, none of these things are good. So that's what I'm going to talk about. So I go to Whole Foods, I buy my stuff there. I don't know anything about, how to get better stuff for me at that time. And I start growing my own food. I start realizing, I want to put nutrients into the soil. So I'm throwing, and I know you technically shouldn't, but I'm throwing my juicing scraps. If you've ever juiced, you get a bunch of just like all this pulp and all this other stuff from the juice, and it's a bunch of different color, like all the stuff that gets extracted, all the fiber. And I would just throw that directly into my soil and just kind of mix it in, not all of it, but some of it. And I had just some lush stuff. I just had kale, collard greens. I think I had some Swiss chard. I had giant sunflowers in there just because it's cool. I was picking off that for a long time. I was eating those things for a really good amount of time. So I realized that if you want healthy food, again, there's also a microbiome within the soil that is growing this food, and you are transferring this to yourself. This is not some hocus pocus crazy philosophy. So this brings us to the current situation that I now find myself in, and that is agricultural practice, because it is difficult to have. I want to steer agricultural practice as much as I want to focus on buying my stuff from local sources, and I want other people to focus on buying their stuff from local sources. I also want for us to shift our understanding of agricultural process, because the current agricultural process that we have is absolutely devastating to our entire planet. And this isn't something I set out to prove or to come across. I'm just some kid from the freaking city. Like, I know nothing about farming, to be very honest. I don't know anything firsthand about what's going on, other than I've worked in gardens and I've had some vegetables that I've grown in my life. But I really don't know anything about it. So I'll be very honest that this is just me stumbling across something kind of as a curious person, maybe what would you be considered a journalist, and just seeing what the information is and being fascinated by it and realizing the implications that it has for our world, that every bite you take has a whole thing behind it. There's a whole system of agriculture. There was a process of getting it to you. There was a store involved, and that store has its own code of ethics. So there's so many things behind all of this, and this ties into my other aspect of the idea of personal responsibility. We've grown up in the most protected and taken care of civilization that's ever existed, and now people are just so entitled to this idea, or I'm sorry, beholden to this idea that someone else is going to take care of you, that someone else is going to go out and make things better, that they're going to, that they're actually going to look out for you, and that anyone does anything for you. I mean, it's just nonsense. Or that when you realize they're not, that they need to be punished and blah, 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 and someone else needs to change. No, you need to know that people are out there trying to capitalize off of the weaker parts of you. They're trying to manipulate those things. They are trying to make money off of the lesser parts of you. Because the reality is you don't make money off of empowering people. You don't make money off of telling them you're not going to change your life by buying this powder and this supplement, or even just by simply eating food. It will change many aspects of your life, actually, by changing your diet. But you can't be sold something. There's nothing there. You have to come up with the motivation and the drive through the understanding that what you're doing is important, and what you're doing is what matters. Where you spend your money is how you shape the world. Where you focus your time and your effort and your energy is where you shape the world. I've talked about this in one of my podcasts, and I think, it's like, well, we think about like, well, I'm just like a cog in the machine. Well, no matter what, you're a cog in the machine, because you're going to eat food and you're going to require resources. And so those resources are coming from somewhere. Even if you're just a lump of shit on a couch all day, you're eating food and you require resources. And that food, those resources, those all come from somewhere. So anywhere you are putting your money is where you are putting your resources. And if you can take your money away from certain resources, and then you support other resources, and enough people do that, well, now you're changing the course and flow of our actual system. And I don't think any law that you make is going to do that, to be very honest. If you look at organic agriculture, let's look at Earthbound Farms, or organic spinach, your tub of spinach that you get, Earthbound Farms. Everyone's seen it. Your lettuce spring mix. This is probably the majority of people's greens come from Earthbound Farms food. I would be very willing to bet that, honestly. The majority of people who are somewhat health conscious. So this brings me to them. They are growing, I think they even use a certain type of hydroponic in a certain way or something like that. They have a very, very refined system of how they produce their food. So they produce that spinach, and they have like a laser that comes through and just cuts it off like as soon as it gets to a certain height, and just and they're just popping it out. They do some level of crop rotation, but it's just like back and forth and back and forth. So it's just one form of crop rotation. And there's also fields and fields, or warehouses and warehouses, because I'm not sure if it's actual fields outdoors. I think they're in warehouses because I think they control the climate, they control the sunlight. I think it's all indoors. So either it's fields and fields, I can't remember, but the reality is this is an example of what's going on with our agriculture. Either it's fields and fields of single row crops that is just and I'll do a whole different thing on row cropping, because it's a whole different thing to get into. Either it's fields and fields of rows of crops, or it's causing devastation to our actual environment, or it's warehouses and warehouses of rows and crops causing usage of resources and extra resources like sunlight, false sunlight, meaning different forms of interior lighting, which cause a lot of electric use, and then you have to pump in all of your nutrients. You have to ship in all of your fertilizers and your compost and your soil and blah blah blah. So it's not even that you're cycling from the earth in some way, which maybe is better in the sense that you're not destroying the soil through your garbage practice. But you're also creating a whole other step and amount of industry and carbon offset, output because of that. And so when you look at a company like Earthbound Farms, and then you see that one package of spinach, you see the plastic involved in it, the process behind that, and then everything involved in getting that spinach to you, I mean, you are just looking at one of the most carbon positive systems that we could have created on the planet. So the idea that animal agriculture is our problem is just so far from the case. We'll get further into that. But this is what all brought me to this. So now I just feel this huge, I don't know, I just feel so compelled to understand this and try to read about this more and to try and share this. And when I do share this idea with people, they're pretty excited about it, and they're pretty interested in it. And the reality is the facts speak for themselves, and I feel strongly about this, and unfortunately what this does do is it makes me at odds with the vegan community and the vegetarian community, I guess. Vegetarian, I don't know. That's an interesting one. I guess I don't mean to be mean, but I'm just like at least I want to be kind. I want to be kind, but the vegetarian thing is just baffling to me because I'm like, it's okay that animals are being kept for like dairy products and that they're being tortured for that. The worst part of their life is the existence, really, and the claim of the animal rights movement. It's not the death. I know they say like, well, you're killing it, and you're killing unnecessary, but it's like death is not really an issue. Death, you're just no longer there anymore. The idea that their family members are missing them and they are they've lost out on some opportunity. I mean, that's just the anthropomorphizing like crazy, and it's just entirely misguided. So the reality is, what we want is quality of life for these animals. I don't honestly necessarily care how long they live for, because I don't think there's no greater whatever. It's quality of life that we want to achieve for these animals. So if quality of life is what you want, I guess I don't understand why it's okay to chain them up and keep them in these terrible conditions that you've deemed as terrible conditions and say, like, this is a horrible thing I don't want to support, but I will eat cheese and I will drink milk. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. But when I see ludicrous shit, I have to say it. If someone's like, well, this is why you're wrong about that, it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you're like, well, it's the death that I really care about, then okay. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, because animals are absolutely going to die in the process of agriculture, and so many die in the process of grinding up your wheat. And so many die in the process of spraying these pesticides, and so many die in the process of eliminating the whole biodiversity and the ecosystem of the entire center of our country, and the ants and the bugs. And I think the vertebrate species over the past 100 years we've lost vertebrate species over the past 100 years. We have lost vertebrate species at 100 times the rate ever before seen in history. So our agricultural system is doing that. This is destroying aspects of our entire land. And the idea that eating these plants that are nutrientless compared to the meat being produced in this, even all in this terrible way, that you're going to eat more of these plants to produce an unhealthy diet, in hopes that this helps our agricultural system and it grows better people and it helps a healthier environment. It's so misguided, and this is the main thing I really hope that we can try to talk about more here. So I think that's the end of what's going on for me. I think I've talked long enough, and I'm gonna try and do this at least once a week. That's my commitment. At least once a week. This was easier than I thought. Who knew? You do really just have to begin. And now as I've begun, I realize, okay, I could do a whole thing on just row cropping and monocropping. I could do keto. I could do all these different things. So I appreciate anyone who watched any of this, and especially if you've watched until now. Yeah, that's a little crazy. But I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a good one.